Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1118 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Electronic Products Recycling Association. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana. The lowest prices on cannabis guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut is Andrew Stoeten. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
It looked for a while like your debut, your long, highly anticipated debut would be in person. Like I had my hopes up until yesterday, but alas, here you are joining me remotely.
Yeah, I'm out here in Peterborough these days, and I don't own a car, which makes some of the travel difficult. Also, making the travel difficult is our lovely provincial, the body that runs our intercity transport, Go Transit. Peterborough to Oshawa used to be a pretty clean run on the bus. And now they got you going through Bowmanville. There's like a million stops. It's really a nightmare that they seem to have no solution to, which is odd because the solution is just run a Peterborough to Oshawa bus because that's where everybody's,
right.
I don't know. You need an express and a local. These things exist in the world.
Now, I did bump into a gentleman who has a great question for you later in this conversation,
Okay.
but I bumped into him at a Jays game, of course, and he did tell me, like he explicitly said to me, he would be willing. He's a really big fan of the show, and he's a big fan of yours, and he said he'd be willing to pick you up and drive you to my front door, but unfortunately, that never came to be.
Yes, I'm sorry, but hopefully the audio is enough. I got such a presence, I'm sure.
Well, okay. Well, that's the thing.
Fine.
You have a presence. You have a presence. But if you were physically here, you'd be leaving with presence. That's the only catch here. So I'll do it quickly off the top that you will not be receiving a large lasagna from Palma Pasta, and it's delicious. So Andrew, maybe if you're ever in town, we get you back for round 2, and I can get you one. But thank you, Palma Pasta. And thank you, Great Lakes Brewery, for the fresh craft beer. You will not be leaving here with fresh craft beer because you're in Peterborough. I had a Ridley Funeral Home flashlight for you. I had StickerU stickers. I had a Canna Cabana cozy. Anyway, I'm just now really just torturing you by telling you all the good things you won't receive today because you're on Zoom.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I'm hurt by it. It's my own fault, but that's great swag. I've listened to the show. I knew what I was giving up by not being able to make it in. But alas.
Well, listen, no, Andrew, I'm honored that you made time for me today. I'm looking forward to this. I find you like just the right amount of mysterious. Like I actually seriously, I'm going to find out, what makes him tick. I'm going to get answered a bunch of the questions everybody's wondering, but we got to start off Peterborough. Okay. Are you originally from Peterborough? Are you one of these many Torontonians who have escaped the big smoke and moved out of the city? Like, where are you from originally?
Yeah, I'm originally from Peterborough. It's there's a vortex here that sucks people back in. I thought I would never, ever, ever live here again. I moved like as quickly as possible after high school to the city and was there for a very, very long time. And then basically just ran evicted and was like, okay, I might save some money, stay at my parents' house for a little bit, and that kind of lasted longer than I was ready for or they were ready for. So I was like, okay, I got to do something about this, and found an apartment that I pay way too little for. That's really walkable in downtown Peterborough, and was like, well, I can't not do this. So I just sort of like, as we'll probably discuss, like nothing I've ever done has been especially well planned, and so here I am.
And here you are. And how is the patch these days? Like you must enjoy it enough that you're willing to like put down some some anchors there and stick around. Like what's the patch up to these days?
It depends where you are. To be honest, there are, like everywhere else, there are some problems coming out of the pandemic. There are definitely some problems. I live downtown, and you see a lot of people in hard times, and not enough being done to address that. But it also, there's lots of wonderful people in communities, and where I am, I can go and have go hang out in a bunch of cafes on Hunter Street, which is a lovely little corner of downtown where there's some really interesting people, and it's kind of anchored by Trent University, which kind of keeps Peterborough weird in a sense,
right.
And sort of it feels like a little neighborhood of the city. It just takes you like 4 hours to get there.
Oh yeah, no, and forgive me for like not knowing my Peterborough geography, but is that South End or North End? Like, are you a South End guy or a North End guy?
I grew up in the North End, but downtown is downtown, and the South End, we look down on that, obviously. The fierce local rivalries.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Shout out to the patch. Now Hebsy, man, when he heard you were coming on, I got a few notes, but Hebsy, I co-host a podcast with Mark Hebshier every Friday morning called Hebsy on Sports. And he wants to, who's the best ball player? This is Hebsy's question. Who's the best ball player to ever come out of Peterborough?
I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm not a super grassroots guy. I should be. That's shameful. I should be out there, at the Diamond every day. But I don't know. I'm just making tweets and watching TV mostly. So I don't know. But there's a guy who plays for the Winnipeg Gold Knights right now. He's from Peterborough. Who was drafted, I think, in the 5th round. Oh. And they've had a couple Jays draft picks over the years. There was a guy about my age drafted, I think, at 98. Farther back, I don't think there's ever been a major leaguer from Peterborough, but playing out there, pitching for Winnipeg is that's pretty serious advanced ball. I mean, that's an independent league team now. But
and what's this guy's name? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know.
Google it, everybody. Google it.
Yeah, just
Google it. Okay, a couple of quick hits here, and then I'm going to actually quote a tweet that you tweeted recently, and right off the top, I'm going to find out what this tweet was about before we dive in. But
no.
Do you know Gare Joyce? You know Gare Joyce?
Not really. No. I know Dan Burke, who Gare Joyce once got in a fist fight with, apparently. But
well, Gare, by the way,
Gare would appreciate me sharing that.
Well, I think he might appreciate that. To be honest, I think he always
the one time I tweeted about it, he did not.
Okay, because he kind of likes this fight an Irish persona he's got going on. But he says you're super sharp. So Gare's that's a compliment. Super sharp. And Chris in Toronto says finally, and I just want to pick up this thread there that we did come close to making this happen years ago, right? Like I feel like you're one of those guys got in the calendar, maybe not quite like a specific day, but we were going to do this pre-pandemic, right?
I believe so. Yeah, it could have been around the time of the renoviction. I'm not sure.
Well, where were you living when this renoviction happened? Like what neighborhood?
Just north of Kensington Market.
Okay, and the landlord kicked you out so they could renovate. Is that what happened there?
Yes, but I will say this, and this is a dastardly practice, obviously, but I will say the landlord lived in the top part of the house and was starting a family and owned the whole house and was like, we are renovating. We need you to get out. But it wasn't as shady as some of those other sort of things.
Yeah, well, usually it's kicking you out and then tripling the rent. It's like the move, right? This is not that.
Not quite, no. In that, it literally was not. Yeah,
it was such a boot, man. You went from Kensington Market there to Peterborough. Like that's quite the boot. So
a little bit. I'd been in that place for like 5 years, and I got to tell you, rent changed over the 5-year period. You could probably pick any 5-year period in the city, and you'll find a disparity between where rents were when you moved in and when you moved out.
Yeah, I don't know how. Like, I was renting between marriages. I was renting for a period of time, and it was like fairly reasonable. And I needed, an extra room because I had a couple of kids, and there was this. Anyway, this is this is my story. But that was about 10 years ago. I honestly don't know what I do today. Like, I don't know. Like, and I bought around 9 years ago, just before, like, I think the price of this home I'm in right now might have doubled or something. It's insane. Like, I really don't know how you live in this city without having like inherited some wealth from your rich parents or uncle or something. I have no idea.
I think it's very difficult. Yeah, and guess what? It's creeping here too. I mean,
Wow.
I think it may have gone down. I think it was like 800,000 is the average of like.
Dude, that's real. Are you kidding me? I thought I could pick
Yeah.
something up for like 250.
No, yeah, it's followed me here.
Wow. Like, where do you go then? Like, if it's like that everywhere. I mean, I heard the Hammer was rising really quite a bit in Hamilton. Like, where am I supposed to go now if I can't afford to live here? Like, Thunder Bay? Where do I go next? And no insult to Thunder Bay, but it's far away. Like, how far north do you have to go now? It's nuts.
It's a little nuts. Yeah. Wow.
All right. So, okay. So,
I mean, I'm resigned. That's the world we've built here, and kind of unquestioningly.
Well, it sucks. I think it sucks.
Along with it's terrible.
Because also, I don't like rich people. Like, it's like I'm like allergic to rich people. So it's like, and someone will say, "Hey, you have a house in Toronto. You're a rich person." That offends me. Like, if I'm now like this is all very offensive. But okay, one more note. Mike Lynch says he's really looking forward to this one, so don't disappoint Mike Lynch. And now, Andrew, I'm going to read a tweet I read from you the other day, and then we're going to get into it. But you wrote, "The best thing about being banned from both Toronto sports radio stations is never having to do useless, time-consuming hits on either Toronto sports radio station. The second best thing is LOL." Is it true? I'm assuming I need this story here, but are you really banned from both the Fan 590 and 1050 TSN radio?
As far as I understand, yeah. I have no idea why. I have angered the wrong executive, which, based on my career, doesn't necessarily surprise me. But yeah, I get people asking me all the time, like producers, new guys coming along. They're like, "Oh, hey, can you come on?" And I'm like, I would love to do it, but you better check with your bosses first, because as far as I know, both TSN and Sportsnet on the radio side.
So there wasn't an incident that you know of? You're not like conveniently forgetting the time that you made a drunken hit and slurred a swear word or something? There's no story there.
I mean, I would like to think I would remember that. No, and it's both. I don't know if it's someone who's flipped from one to the other. It's odd to me, but also, you don't get paid for those things, and sometimes they're at inconvenient times. I like to, it's decent promotion for the brand and for the website and whatever. And I don't want to turn my nose up at it as much as I maybe did in that tweet, but it's funny to me that that's the situation, especially, I know lots of people at those spots, and they can't get me on, and it's odd. And also I'm unbothered by it.
Okay, I'm glad you're unbothered by it. But it is interesting, I think, for some people that there's no comp. Like, at least if you come on Toronto Mike, you do leave with this delicious lasagna from Palma Pasta, and I do give you 8 fresh craft beer cans from Great Lakes, and you leave with some good, like, solid, this is like some real stuff. Not cash, of course, but I think it might be surprising to some people that when you hear, and I'll pick on somebody who's an FOTM, and you're now an FOTM, Andrew, so welcome. You're a friend of Toronto Mike.
Hell yeah.
So, like, I'll pick on a guy I quite like, Keegan Matheson. I'm going to pick on, okay? Great. He's now with MLB. He sold out. We can talk about that later. But I think he got Chisholm's job, and Chisholm, all these East Coasters, and you're not East enough there. Okay. So he does a hit on, let's say, 590, talking about, I don't know, big Blue Jay Yankee series or something. He's like, there's no financial restitution, and like he doesn't get like a wire transfer for like $50 or something. Like, don't you think that there should be some nominal compensation for the guest, the professional guest coming on and doing analysis? What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel that the margins are quite as wide for the radio industry right now for that to be a thing as much. I know I'm sure that there are.
No, you're right, because Bell and Rogers are hurting, so it's true. It's true.
Excellent point. But no, I think American, like I know, like I think Keith Law will get money, or guys like guys like that with higher profiles. But I can't speak to Keegan either. But I know I certainly haven't been offered.
And you're doing it. If you do it, if you were allowed to do it, it would simply be because you could maybe you could promote your Substack.
Yeah.
So do you want to do that quickly now, even though we're going to dive in deeper, but just because like just even right now, tell people how they can subscribe to your Substack and what that's about, and then we'll revisit all this when we get to it chronologically.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's the batflip.ca. It's my Substack site. It's free for everybody to read, which is different than sort of the model that a lot of people do with Substack. I try not to, and I make a point of not putting anything behind a paywall, and just ask people who value the work to support it if they can. And it's been richly rewarding, karmically, if not financially, moving to that model. But yeah, that's where you'll find me putting down my weird long form thoughts that aren't fit for Twitter.
All right, now you buckled in, you're comfy, you're feeling good, because we're gonna get to some a little bit more interesting fare. Although it's been interesting already,
well,
but
we'll see.
Doug Fox writes in. It's a cool name, Doug Fox. He writes in, Mike, thanks in advance for having Andrew Stoeten on the podcast. I had always wanted to write about baseball, and a decade ago, Andrew and his Drunk Jays fans colleagues inspired me to start my own blog about the Blue Jays farm system. His writing is always insightful, refreshing, and irreverent. Not irrelevant. Irreverent. I want to make sure I say it right. Traits really missing in Toronto's sports journalism landscape these days. Looking forward to listening. So that's a nice comment from Doug that you inspired him to kind of follow his own path, and the fact that he calls your writing insightful, refreshing, and irreverent. I'll have to search that word, make sure it's a compliment. I feel like Homer Simpson, but that's a common thread of the notes I've been getting. People enjoy your analysis and your insightful, refreshing content.
Yeah, that's really nice. Doug's awesome. Doug does a great site, Future Blue Jays,
right,
which does keep tabs on the on the Blue Jays minor league system in a way that nobody else out there is doing, and that's great to hear, because that's sort of, I mean, one thing, like the oh man, any idiot can do this sort of ethos was sort of what inspired us in the first place when we started doing this. Like again, like I said earlier, like nothing I've ever done is particularly planned, but like friends and I thought that the coverage of the Blue Jays in the city was a little was not what we thought about the game, and that's sort of how we ended up.
Okay, so let's start there.
Sure.
Where are you in your life and career? Like, what was the plan? Did you go to post-secondary school? Like, give me after high school, what did you do?
Yeah, I went to York. I lived on campus at York for a year, and then immediately was like, Keel and Steels ain't for me. So moved downtown, commuted, which afforded me a lot of time to not go to class. But ended up, I remember I had a prof, Tom Cohen, was in the humanities department there, was just like, oh, you should go into creative writing. Your writing has voice. And that's always sort of stuck with me as something that I was like, oh, okay. And there was a program at York that, you had to do submissions, and it was only, limited to people. They just kept taking me. They just kept accepting me into like higher levels of that program. So ended up doing creative writing at York. During university, I worked at a company that did secret shopping, mystery shopping, where I ended up, middle management in my mid-20s, running the editing department, because everybody who, they were just finding people off the street to do these reports on, the local pizza and stuff like that. And the grammar and spelling and the following of instructions was not necessarily up to their standards, so they had a whole department of people to basically just fudge all the reports and completely lie to the clients.
This is the real talk.
Most of it was straight, but there was definitely a lot of like, oh, okay, I'm not letting you say this about your experience. It was all kind of soul crushing in the way that I mean, if anybody knows about that industry, it's just, you're sending fake customers in to gather data and be like, okay, did this person smile? Did they upsell you? Did they have their name tag on right, et cetera, et cetera? Is where the facilities clean? And like all these, the jargon is coming back to me, and it's giving me nightmares right at the moment.
Honestly, this is soul crushing. Like even hearing you talk about it.
It really, really was. I mean, and because ultimately it's like minimum wage frontline, work, retail and restaurant workers who are getting in trouble because of this whole process. So that was tough. That was not easy, but yeah, eventually, and I got paid just absolute garbage to do that as well, which was a factor. But also they let me get away with a lot. I was in a band at the time. We'd always have shows, and they'd be like, "Okay, you can take this day off. You can come in late on Tuesday. You have to play in Kingston. You could do all this kind of stuff."
What was your band's name?
It was called Action Makes. There may be a handful of people out here who remember. That's how I know Dan Burke, who booked the Silver Dollar.
And okay, I was going to ask you, what venues did you play?
Yeah, the Dollar was kind of our home, but yeah, we played all over the city. Lots of I think we had a record that came out in like 2010. We didn't last much longer before that or after that, but before we'd been, some sort of like aspiring scenester band.
I love Toronto's aspiring scenester bands. Like I could do 90 minutes on this.
No doubt, yeah. And I mean, I heard your episode with Richard Trapunski, who was with Now and Chart Attack and stuff, and he was always a proponent of my band and of that Silver Dollar scene, and that was that's a weird corner to walk by now when I do get down to the city, because it's some weird stuff happened there for a very long time, and it's now just condoized, like I guess like a lot of other corners of the city.
Soul crushing again. Okay, keep crushing my soul, Andrew.
So they let me get away with a lot. I mean, we never talked about it, but I seem to get away with it. The IT guy was a big Blue Jays fan, which really helped. Shouts to Kevin. Because I think when you're in the tattling on retail employees industry, I don't think that there's a big leap to monitoring your employees' keystrokes and stuff like that. Which I don't know if they were doing that. I don't want to. I'm not here to slander.
But think about your job. Essentially, if I'm hearing correctly, is that the guy and I don't remember what minimum wage was at the time, but let's make it up and say it was like $12 an hour or whatever. But the guy or gal or whomever is working, frontline retail, which is a shitty job. I did it. I worked at McDonald's for 18 months and I had to get out of there. But you're making your minimum wage and you're working hard, and your job is basically to make sure the grammar's right and this prose is exemplary as you shit all over the poor son of a gun for his boss. Is that right?
That's pretty much right. Yes. And often, I mean, the franchisees didn't escape the criticism. And it's weird. I think if people really got the mindset that, oh, now I am a food critic, or I get to really pick on something.
You're more of a narc than a food critic.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, but a lot of people really got off on the idea that oh yeah, now I'm going to do this great. And they really enjoyed narking on everything they possibly could.
Right.
I don't know. I had some wonderful times there. Met some fun people who were mostly from Pickering. It was very strange. It was like at Dobb Mills in Eglinton, which was a place I had to take the bus to all the time. Man, some of those days, because again, they'd let me roll in late. And I was just so good at the job. And so, I mean, not to brag, but like I was so good at the job and so underpaid, so severely underpaid, that when I started sort of I became the head of the editing department, which means instead of editing the reports that come in from the secret shoppers, I was, making the instructions and detailing what actually goes into these things, and that gave me a lot of time with word processors, and that unless somebody's directly over your shoulder,
right?
If you're writing about Richard Griffin's latest column, they can't really tell. So I kind of like got into a rhythm of being a scumbag I got my work done. I maybe made it seem like it took a little bit longer for me to do things than it did, and then while doing that, I would fire off weird baseball thoughts into the internet.
And, okay, where would these resolve these? Because I totally get it. You basically can start a side hustle while on the clock for your primary money making hustle. which is actually pretty damn sweet. But where were you posting this prose on the internet?
Well, mostly, I mean, because this is how, I mean, I'm old, obviously.
Okay,
And,
well, you're not as old as me, so give us an
that's-
idea. Like, where are we here? Because I mean, you're talking to a guy who was blogging in 2002. So
okay, yeah.
let's hear
So
it.
we weren't there. We weren't there yet. I think Drunk Jason fans started just at the very tail end of 2006. And before that, there was no social media, but we did have like a bunch of friends and I just had like an email chain and would just like during the day would like reply all. A bunch of my friends went to like Waterloo for engineering, and they were just out looking at parking garages, and then going to their car for an email to fire an email off, or maybe even then they couldn't do that. They had to drive back to the office and email, and so we would just sort of chat in that way.
Okay.
And we also had we've had a hockey pool with a lot of the same folks for like 20 years. And that the message board on there also got sort of polluted with me and a couple guys going back and forth about baseball. And eventually we got told by our friends, like, just don't reply all, just keep all of this to yourselves. We don't want to hear how mad you are about Richard Griffin's axe to grind with JP Ricciardi. Wow. And so we're like, well, that's fucking dumb. Like, what we're just gonna message ourselves this stuff. And so we just literally like dumped it on a blog, and we're like, okay, well, didn't think of the form of the medium, didn't think anybody would ever read it, but we were just kind of like, okay, well, like at least that there's a chance somebody might see it.
No, dude, firstly,
we're doing it not just for ourselves.
I'm an RSS. I'm still an RSS guy, but I was in the, this era you're referring to. That was my lifeblood. I would subscribe to blogs and and this is Drunk Jays fans, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my main thing. At the time, I was using Google Reader. Now I use something called Feedly because Google Reader is no more. But totally using RSS to get these updates pushed to me, so I didn't have to go visit 25 different blogs or whatever. That was my lifeblood at this time. So you're dumping it all in a blog, Drunk Jays fans, which I still love the format of blogging. I was writing a blog this past weekend. I still think that's a great format. Reverse chronological order, time-stamped blobs of thoughts and links and embed. I think it's a great format. But as we talk more about Drunk Jays fans, I'm just going to bring in Mark Vendramini, who is a listener of Toronto Mike and a fan of yours. And his big question you'll have to answer at some point here is, what happened to Drunk Jays fans?
We sold it to The Score. And when they fired us all, they literally they laid us off, and we're like, hey, $10,000 and you can get the domain back. And we're like, I just lost my job. Are you fucking kidding me? So kind of made the decision that I guess that's your brand now. If I check the domain at least once a year to see if they ever let it expire. It's like, no, somebody over there is still paying to keep that domain. Well, I have a lot of friends at The Score, love Benji and Mo. I'm sorry, but that's what happened. But yeah, that was after a long ride with The Score, which is an interesting time. I'm sure you have.
Well, hey,
questions about it,
yeah. So okay, firstly, that's amazing that you built something from scratch. I'm a guy who likes to build something. Well, this podcast you're on, I built from scratch, right? So I like to build these things, and then I own them, and I'm like the sole proprietor of this thing. And no one's ever offered me any money for this thing. Not that I would ever sell it, because it really is me. It's a little different. But you built this Drunk Jays fans blog that The Score gave you actual money. And then I guess, so The Score gives you money. Who owned Drunk Jays fans? How did you guys split up the money?
Yeah, it was just me and Dustin Parks, who was my there were sort of other characters who would come in and out, but Dustin and I were sort of the core of it for a long time.
Okay. So did you split? So you got, honestly, ideally you tell me how much The Score gave you, because that's the shit I'm really interested in, but I would understand if you didn't want to, disclose that. But do you want to share or give us an idea? What kind of scratch would The Score give you for Drunk Jays fans?
I think it was like 20 grand. But honestly, it was really sort of a form of a bonus. It was just like, well, we'll own this, we'll own this, and
you'll work for them.
Because how that came about is we were doing Drunk Jays fans, and The Score at the time had some ambitious folks who were in their web department, which was very, very small in 2007, I guess, at this point. And we're looking, they had a radio studio there. They did the satellite radio stuff, and they were sort of like set up to produce like web content. And they're like, this is 2007. Why don't we have like in-house stuff? Like they basically were just running like a news feed on their website, and managed to, because like the TV was just a behemoth, and that's I'm probably still the way that it is, but especially in those days, the web department there was literally like 4 people.
And just so people know, this is before Rogers buys it. This is when
correct.
It was originally Headline Sports, right? And then it became the Score.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. And yeah, I mean, yeah, Rogers, that came along. They almost got bought. Like the first month I was there, like everybody was just prepared for it all to be over. And I'm like, just happily, like, this is the greatest day of my life. Like, because basically they hired us to do a podcast at first.
Okay.
And just sort of like freelance contract stuff. They're like, we think you guys have a good voice. Like, why don't you just do a podcast? Like, let's like sort of sight unseen. And then like after the first season of us doing a podcast, they're like, okay, we have like we have room to hire one of you. And Dustin at the time was and Justin, who was the other guy I would do the podcast with. They were both like, Dustin was like a government speechwriter at that point at Queen's Park. Justin had a government job, and I was still doing the secret shopping stuff. And so I was like, guys, I'm taking this new job. I'm sorry, but you're not leaving that and leaving me at this other place. So that's sort of how I got hired there.
Okay.
And Dustin eventually came on.
Well, now let me ask you a question that came in from Jake S. And it quite simply is, what happened to Dustin Parks? Do they still talk baseball? Does Parks even like baseball?
That's a better question for him than for me. No, I don't talk to Dustin too much anymore, to be honest with you. Yeah, that's but I understand why people have the question. Dustin was at the National Post for a long time. I think he had a house in Hamilton, but sort of drifted apart as will happen with friends from, Dustin and I went to high school together, so it was a lot for a while, so just sort of went our separate ways, despite sort of being adjacent to the same industry. But yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Dustin, I mean, yeah, I couldn't tell you.
No, that's fair. You can imagine when people find out you're coming on my show, it's like this is their chance to ask all these nosy personal questions, like how much money did the Score? Actually, that one came from me. That was my nosy personal question. But how much money did the Score? And $20,000, by the way. I was thinking in my mind, like I can, you're a young man. You offer and you get the job with it, which is key, right? You're going to work for the Score, which was huge because you had a soul-crushing job, like ratting out minimum wage, like retail employees, and now you're writing about sports and getting paid to do it at the Score. Like that must have been amazing. So maybe this is a good chance to tell me about your experience with the Score, and then why does it come to an end for you at the Score?
Sure. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, not just getting paid to write about sports, but also like I could bike to work in 10 minutes. I remember it was like the first month of biking to work was just like angels were singing the entire time to me, because it was, I mean, that bus to Don Mills in Eglinton, so many days where I'd forget my headphones and it'd just be like a class full of kids going up to the science center and just me like just miserable sitting in the back corner of the bus. I mean, it's not an ideal way to start your day. And then you're sort of marooned out by Winford Drive or whatever. Not ideal. So so starting at the Score was awesome. We were sort of like, we had a great, our bosses were awesome and really, this one guy, John Savage, a Gen X dude, I think you would get on with and has, and just sort of came about his job and in sort of creating web content and being the main sort of executive for that stuff and pushing for what he pushed for was he kind of just had this little like punk rock like wing of the building where we were just doing weird sports stuff with like and kind of like completely disconnected from the TV side. Like a lot of the TV talent you'll find the Score was in an interesting place because it was a great like sort of farm team, and a lot of people who've gone on to like really successful careers were coming out of the TV side, and that eventually started happening on the web as well. But it's sort of like, you know, some people want to wear the suit and be the TSN guy, and some people want to do the crazy stuff. And it was just this mashup of all sorts of ideas, and just and I, you know, I think that they, as we can see, I mean, I think everybody at the time had the sense that it was sort of like, you know, this is they're doing this to eventually cash in on it, and that it was not surprising to see that Rogers, you know, purchased it at the time that they did. And that was really interesting. I mean, at the time, us on the website who had really sort of been discouraged from getting too friendly with the TV folks, which is probably a shame, but sort of lent itself to our punk rock spirit and our blog. The blog jail is what we referred to it as long, because that's, you know, we've got Drew Fairservice came in, who I've done a podcast with for years when I was at the Athletic, and Justin Bourne was there, and Scott Lewis, who's been all over the place, a lot of awesome folks in blog jail doing interesting things. But we thought that when the TV side was sold to Rogers, we're like, oh, sucks for them. Like they're just going to get enveloped by the Rogers side, and a lot of people are probably going to lose their jobs. And I don't know that it really went that way. We were like, oh, we're on the winning team. We're going to this new startup, the app. They're taking all the digital assets. We're going to do all this content for their new app, and that's really the wave of the future. And then they decided at some point that long form stuff was not the wave of the future that people wanted. I think they were really, I forget which Olympics it was. It was like the 2012 Olympics.
Oh, London.
The London Olympics. Yes. And they had news alerts. They put an alert feature on the app, which like people's phone buzzed every time the event is starting or something happens. And like the traffic they got from that, from just like little snippets of content, was like massive, was just like completely overwhelming everything else that they were doing. And so they looked at us like, you know, screwing off to the bar at like 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And I think eventually kind of got thinking like, you know, we could repurpose that salary and do better. And it's a shame, I think, because they've kind of, you know, as the industry does, they've sort of ebbed back towards that kind of stuff.
You were probably on the bleeding edge a little bit. Like you sound like digital rebels, and
a little. I mean, that's how we felt. But
I can hear you talking. Like I would have enjoyed being a part of that team. Like I think that I'm cut from that cloth, and it sounds like a really cool, you know, place to be at the time. But then, yeah, this whole like move away from long form, that might explain, you know, that might have something to do with. Did it have anything to do with the Sportsnet magazine getting shuttered, or is this before that?
That would have been before that, yeah.
Okay,
I mean, because we weren't with Rogers at all. Like,
right.
The digital side of the Score ended up being what is the Score now? It's Score Bet or whatever it is.
Okay. So that's an interesting change. So it's only the TV part of the Score that ended up as like whatever they call it, 360, Sportsnet 360 yes. or whatever. Okay, yeah. okay. But at some point they decided
we were just all with the devs and like the people doing coding and making the app, and then there was like a small news team, and then this weird, you know, the transported blog jail folks just doing longer form stuff that didn't have the audience to justify our salaries, I suppose.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, so what do you do after, I guess you're told by the Score that your services are no longer required, I suppose.
Yeah. I kept working there for a bit, frankly, because they did that. I was kind of checked out. This is part of how I'm mysterious, I feel, because I was, you know, they kind of gave me the choice to work at the office or work from home or be wherever, like, if I didn't need to be there, I didn't have to be there. And a lot of folks had that same, you know, opportunity, but were happy to, you know, be more office type people and come into the office every day and do their work there. And I was like, you'll see me when you see me, which was nice, which was wonderful for me. But also, I wasn't there the day they fired everybody. And so they're like, I got a call from my boss, was just like, yeah, you better come down and talk to us. I guess you've seen what happened. And I literally, and he's like, yeah, let's go for a pint at the Firkin across the street. I'm like, oh man, that sucks. You had to fire all those guys. And he's like, oh no, you're fired too. Oh, okay. This is changed. This is a bit of a different conversation, but also because at that point we sort of separated out into, I was doing Drunk Jays Fans, Dustin was doing more general MLB stuff. We had people doing all sorts. So Richard Whittle is another soccer guy, the Richie Football, lovely dude. Also got canned after this, after like just working his ass off for the 2014 World Cup, and like I think was on vacation when this happened, which we didn't care for, but we got all of that out in a lot of beer cans in the East End there at one point, not long after the firing. But they let Drunk Jays Fans, because it was in the middle of the summer, they let me continue until the end of the Blue Jays season, which I suppose was nice. I didn't dislike it. It was weird. I remember, they would bringing in, because it was, I mean, we'd been established there. We made a bit of money. Not a great amount of money, but like more than the kids coming out of J school would. And I forget who it was. I wish I could remember, but I remember seeing like somebody not long after that. Like I came into the office to grab some stuff, and it was like kind of winding down. And he's like, "Oh hey, like, oh, you're part of the reason I'm here." I'm like, "Yeah, they fucking shit canned me, man. I'm just like clearing out my desk basically, and I'm going to be gone at the end of the." They're quite disappointed in that, and I assure you, I shared their disappointment, because it was a really fun place to work. I'm sure it still is a fun place to work. There were a lot of great people there.
So you finish up the season writing a Drunk Jays fans, which you no longer own. But so what is the next move for Andrew?
The next move was sort of into freelance and into, I did a year. It turned out to be 2015. So that was, so that ended up being kind of worked well. Sure. Worked out well for me. That was a year of some interest in the Blue Jays.
That was that was the hype train. I still remember when Tulowitzki came to town and David Price came to town, and we all just hopped on board like it was 1993. It was like, let's go.
Yeah. Oh, it was crazy. Yeah, absolutely. It was helpful for me, because at the time I was just getting Google ads. I just ran my own website, andrewstoeten.com, and was just doing the same thing with a different skin, basically. And that at the time, Google ads were viable. I don't think that could. I mean, obviously, I don't think that I could get by that way now, because I'm on Substack.
Well, okay. Well, what kind of scratch were you pulling in through AdWords? Well, I guess on your side it's AdSense. I apologize. It's the advertiser.
It would have been AdSense. Right. It wasn't great. There was definitely diminishing returns, but like it would pay my rent.
Okay.
And I would,
that's good.
And I would like freelance and get everything else paid. And I was doing stuff. I did stuff for a year, like I think that was the year I worked at the National Post. I would do a weekly thing for them and do videos there, and would. Okay.
And Vice Sports, were you doing something with Vice Sports at this time?
Yeah, that came about at some point, I think during that time as well. And so yeah, made it work, living in the city, living the dream still.
What about Toronto Life? Were you doing any freelance writing for Toronto Life?
I did do some Toronto Life stuff. Yeah,
I've read your stuff, Toronto Life. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a great editor there who liked me and was willing to pass me stuff. I think I eventually sort of stopped doing it, because I was like, there was too much on my plate for a while. But yeah, no, the freelance thing's tough. And as you know, chasing payments, and both the people that I worked with were usually pretty reliable in that sense, but it is a bit precarious. And so that's the Blue Jays Nation came along after that. The Nation Network, the folks out in Edmonton, wanted to start a Blue Jays vertical.
And so I know that you had like you had Drew. You mentioned Drew earlier, but Drew Fairservice and you. Is this Drew's Fairservice and you co-hosting another, basically a Drunk Jays Fans podcast, if you will?
Yes, exactly that. We tried to call it "What's the Score?" right, and started it right after we were both gone, and got a phone call about that, which was jovial, but also like, don't make me call the lawyer. Yeah. And then of course that's a common phrase. I think we could have gotten away with it, but also we weren't about to hire a lawyer, so we're like, okay, we'll back off on that. Whatever, it wasn't the greatest name anyway, but we got a chuckle out of it. But yeah, started that at the same time as well, and that was sort of funneled into how I was making my living. Right, we had a Patreon early on.
Right. All right, I'm gonna I mentioned earlier that there was a gentleman who was willing to drive to Peterborough. I think he finally at some point, because he made this, he looked me in the eyes and he said, look, I'm willing to do this. I wasn't going to make him do it, but he was willing to do it, which was really cool. And then at some point between then and now, he went to Google Maps and he decided to find out. And when he realized, he realized it was 4 hours of driving. I think he gently, wanted to, back out and renege on the deal. But I wasn't going to hold him to it anyway. But that gentleman's name is Steve Cole. And here's a nice note from Steve. I first met Stoeten at a Pitch Talks event when I went there to apologize to him for being a dick on Twitter. He was very gracious and forgiving and actually invited us out to join them for post-event drinks. Of course, being extremely shy, I didn't go, but that's neither here nor there. Here's his question. This is Steve's question. I have run across Andrew at various Pitch Talks events. Oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to read that part. Okay, anyway. Maybe that was okay.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was nice. I read it. I'm sorry, Steve. I have run across Andrew at various Pitch Talks events years ago. As a matter of fact, one of our earliest events was... we went to featured Andrew and Jeremy Taggart, who's also an FOTM. Jeremy Taggart from Our Lady Peace. My most memorable Pitch Talks evening was when Shulman was on stage and Buck Martinez showed up, heckled him, and was invited up on stage to tell stories. Buck had clearly been out on the town for the evening and was, let's say, fairly loose, in quotes. Another Pitch Talks highlight was the appearance of Jesse Goldberg Strassler, at the time the Jays Double-A announcer, who nobody knew, but he ended up blowing the crowd away. I was wondering if Andrew has any interesting Pitch Talks stories or any particularly memorable Pitch Talks memories. So I'll let you address that specific question there, and then there's a PS from Steve I'm going to read after you tell us about your Pitch Talk stories.
Sure. Yeah, Pitch Talks were great. I really always enjoyed those. There's a real thirst from the community of people of Blue Jays fans to just go and hear people tell stories and hear people talk about the game and yeah, some of those. I don't know if I was at the Buck one or if I was maybe extremely hungover and not really functioning well.
Well, your podcast
there was
Drunk
definitely
Jays
one
fans.
where I was on stage for that. Yeah, you gotta live up to the part a little bit. But no, the one that I really remember, or the one that is dearest to me, they did one at the Phoenix, which is a huge venue,
410 Sherborne Street.
Yeah, and it was just a thrill to be okay, we're in the green room, we're back where all the bands hang out, and that right. It's terrifyingly filthy, because that's what those places are like. But at some point, I think Mark Shapiro was there or Ross Atkins was there, but I just remember at some point, there was all of the guests, because it was a big lineup of guests. I mean, you had to have a lot of pulling power to fill a place like that, which they did. I don't know if it's full, but just even to think that you could do an event like a baseball speaking series at a place like the Phoenix is wild to me. But eventually, everybody was up on stage, or they invited everybody up, or people kind of came and went from the green room. And it was me and Jesse Litch just sitting there crushing beers. Jesse Litch, former Blue Jays pitcher. And we just kind of as the room empties out and it's just the two of us sitting on opposite couches, just well, I guess we're hanging out. And the first thing I'm like, oh yeah, I did this site called Drunk Jays Fans. And he was just like, oh yeah. I remember that one. And I'm like, oh shit.
Oh, that's the worst. When you forget, these are real people, and sometimes you write fair criticism. And then at some point, I don't know, I'll let you finish, except I'll get if I'll meet somebody who will be like, tell me something I wrote about them in 2004 or something. And I'm like, okay, well, that's, it's you never realize one day these people are going to be in a room drinking with you. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, I don't know if all our criticism was fair. I mean, that was our point at the start was to be as brash as possible, to put it mildly. Right. Some of it I don't mind.
I was being kind.
It isn't accessible on the internet anymore, but yeah, he was really, good natured about about it, and we ended up, hey, we sat there for like 40 minutes. I don't know what the hell happened to everybody else, but it was me and Jesse Litch hanging out, and I think he'd been coaching like in the Philippines or something like that, like with the national team or somewhere in that part of the world. And it was just an affable guy. It was just kind of like he was a guest at one point during the show, and just kept hanging out. There was another actually where there's this bar on Dundas called Lucky Shrike that used to be the press club, and I was like spinning records, playing like old soul records after the show one time, and like somehow Pat Henkin ended up coming to stupid Lucky Strike on Dundas.
Wow.
And like Paul Quantrill, they were there at some Pitch Talks thing as well. With, which had nothing to do with me, but I got to hang out with those guys for a while. Took an Uber across town with them because this was happening in the East End somewhere,
right?
Which was like, it was crazy, for a self-professed scumbag who sort of like fell into this whole line of work and world. It was something else.
I relate to everything you're saying, because you just did this thing, like you just started doing this thing, and then you became this guy who writes for this thing, and then fast forward, blah blah blah, you and Henkin are kind of shooting the breeze or whatever. Like it's sort of like, how did I get here? Like I want to do like a Talking Heads song, or like strange it ever as like how did I get here? But it's like you have to kind of like, it's like, terrible analogy maybe, but like the frog doesn't know it's boiling or whatever. Like it's sort of like it's like, you can't get there. We had to go through all this, this tunnel of shit to come out clean on the other side or whatever. We'll discuss how clean it is, but I want to get back to Pitch Talks for a minute because I got more. We're just warming up here. The PS from Steve was, on a related note, he writes, Pitch Talks was killed by a few factors. Sportsnet banning their employees was a big factor. I want to touch on that again in a minute. Then COVID. Plus they got, and this is Steve's opinion, plus they got too big, etc. My follow-up question would be, does Andrew think the Pitch Talks format can be revived and thrive? And is he willing to take on the project?
I think it's a great format. I would hope that it can. I know that they're doing, my co-host on Blue Jays Happy Hour, Nick Ashbourne, does a Pitch Talks podcast now with the Zoobs, Andrew Zuber, who like started off, him and Jake Goldsby, who was on Degrassi, and
he's an FOTM.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Jake's awesome.
Because I listened to his show
with
with
our intern at one point. Like that's how
okay.
he kind of broke in. They gave Zoobs and Jake were like, the score was like, we got interns. They'll do stuff for you. We're like, I don't know. Okay, let's go to Bar Wellington.
Okay.
And discuss.
I used to listen to his podcast with Blake Murphy, Columbia House Party.
Right. Yeah. Blake's awesome too. There's
Blake's an FOTM too. Andrew, you're in good company here.
Another score guy.
Right. Well, and there, I mean, we have so much stuff I want to talk to you about, man. But like the whole state of the Fan 590, like, man, I'm going to hold on to that. Okay. So let's get through this Pitch Talks thing, because I just want to share this.
Right.
So I had before Ashley Docking was on the Fan 590 morning show. By the way, Hebsy thinks he counted it up. He thinks there's been 47 iterations of that morning show in the 30-year history of the Fan, which I think is wild. But he says he's done the math. So anyway, Ashley Docking was there for a bit. You might remember. But before that, she did a Pitch Talks. And you mentioned, drinking the beers at Pitch Talks. I think the mix of beer and Pitch Talks was dangerous, because I am of the opinion that the reason Kelly Gruber was not invited to the 1992 World Series reunion stems from, and you might agree with me, but stems from his appearance at a Pitch Talks where he might have had one too many pops and was misogynist with Ashley Docking. Do you remember this incident?
I wasn't at that one, but I think you're 100% correct that's why he wasn't around. Yeah. I certainly heard about it after the fact.
Well, actually, so I had Ashley on, and of course I asked her about it. And then when I was promoting the show on Twitter, you know what Twitter's like you need people, you want people to click. So you sort of like, sometimes you mention things that are talked about that are sexy. No, I don't know if sexy is the right word, but sensational like that. And Ashley wrote me a note like, upset that I was like mentioning that, but at the time it was literally the biggest thing to ever happen to Ashley Docking. Like it's like the 700-pound gorilla in the room. Like the whole idea, like not to mention it. I don't know how you. It's like when Erica M was invited on Toronto Mike one time, and she said that she would come on, but she didn't want to talk about much music. And I told her like maybe we'll do it another day. Like I can't have you, Erica M, on Toronto Mike unless we talk about much music, because that's like the biggest thing you did for this this audience. Anyway. Ashley Docking, Kelly Gruber at Pitch Talks. I don't know if that had much to do with Sportsnet pulling their people, or if it was just that Sportsnet wanted to start their own version of Pitch Talks, and this was like competition. But it must have been tough, I'd think, to when you get rid of, like, most of our baseball people work for Sportsnet in this market.
Absolutely true. Yeah, no, I think that had a huge thing to do with it. I think it was, I mean, we haven't seen it because of COVID, but I saw Elliot and Jeff Merrick are doing a little tour, like the same circuit, the Boston pizza circuit that they literally did pitch talk. I did a pitch talks out here in Peterborough before I lived here.
Right.
I think that had a lot to do with it too. And yeah, the beer thing was also, it was a very informal atmosphere, which I can understand why.
And by the way, you're speaking to a guy who not only is this show sponsored by a craft brewery, good family-run business. They're fiercely independent. Thank you, Great Lakes. And I enjoy very much drinking a cold Great Lakes or two. But everything in moderation. The danger comes when you're not moderating your. And maybe we'll talk about, I have another question about this later, about which we're going to get to. But anyway, regardless, Sportsnet pulled their people, and Pitch Talks, not sure what the status is, but, post-COVID. But if you and I want to, I have these TMLX events. If you want to combine our events, maybe together we can have a TMLX Pitch Talks variant. We'll have to give it a nice shiny new name, of course, but I think people would come out, so we can talk about that later.
I think that would be great. I mean, I know that Ashley being there definitely was an attempt to. It was really a very male-dominated panel situation.
Sausage fest.
That was complained about for a very, very long time.
Right.
I would hope that if someone revives it, we can. That sort of.
Did we ever learn, like, why did Ashley? Why was she removed from the Fan 590 morning show after such a short run? Did we ever learn what happened, or was that one of those untold stories?
That's not one I have any insight into.
Right.
No, I have no idea.
All right, we'll move on. I'm asking the tough questions here today. Okay. So, and again, you mentioned Blue Jays Nation, right? This is you worked with Nation Network to launch Blue Jays Nation. We talked about all that, I suppose. But I guess I'm going to get you to to The Athletic here. So,
sure.
Is that next in the the Andrew Stoeten
That's after
timeline?
Blue Jays Nation. Yeah, I left Blue Jays Nation. I was freelancing for The Athletic, and then the opportunity came to go there full time. So that was much better money than Blue Jays Nation was able to pay. So the decision was made for me, essentially.
Amazing. And at that time, if I remember correctly, this is around the time when, people like, I know Post Media killed their sports department. Like they merged with the Sun, and then people like John Lott were suddenly out of work or whatever. So what is your relationship like with John Lott, and what role did you play in getting him to The Athletic?
None, but I had him at Blue Jays Nation because
Blue Jays Nation, right?
Yeah, he was working there, and he left there for The Athletic. And I know John. I certainly don't know John as much as some of the people who are who've been for years around the team, and and I know John's taught courses. I have incredible respect for John, and always loved his work. And
sure.
And I when I was at Blue Jays Nation, I had a small freelance budget and was like, okay, this is something that I want to make use of, and like I was kind of caught in that because I was, like I said earlier, I was doing National Post stuff and videos, and that when the merging of those rooms that went away, that was part of the impetus to go to Blue Jays Nation. And yeah, I had Richard Lee Sam doing who now is one of the Blue Jays social folks, who you can read a great Toronto Star piece about the Blue Jays social media, which is like they do a tremendous job. That piece just came out and had him there among other people. But yeah, John was I was just like, we'll pay you money to do a weekly thing, and then eventually The Athletic was like, we're going to pay you to do full-time coverage. So he left, and then soon after I I joined him.
So this is where Birds All Day is your podcast with The Athletic.
This was well they also bought that because that was the one that Drew and I started.
Right. That was okay. That's the name you ended up with. Right.
Yeah, that was basically the Drunk Jays Fans podcast.
Birds All Day. All right. So okay, right now we've got you to The Athletic. There, it only took us an hour. Here we are. Okay. So, what was it like working at The Athletic?
I was a bit of a fish out of water. I did not, a lot of straight-laced kind of folks there, and it's serious journalism and awesome people. The Canadian side, I can't say enough good about it. It was definitely different for me to be, okay, everything has to go through an editor. We're pitching stuff. I was used to being like, okay, I wake up and I'm like, what am I going to say today? Which presented some difficulties at time, but yeah, it wasn't was completely fine. I had a very nice and productive time at The Athletic. I mean, that was through the pandemic. I really it was a place to work.
Who is your boss there?
Well, Myrtle obviously ran sort of the Canadian side of things, and Mike Cormick, who's now at I don't know what they call the betting vertical from True North or whatever, but I believe he's right there. And at first there wasn't a lot of oversight, and it was very much a bloggier kind of spirit, I felt.
Right.
And then they start looking to sell it, and there was eventually a little more top down kind of management going on there, which was less fun, I think, than the early days of it.
What? Here's the $1 million question, Andrew. You ready? And shout out to Sean Fitzgerald, who when they launched The Athletic, he and James Myrtle came over kind of to announce excitedly to talk about the new venture, The Athletic. And I'm glad they're still around because a lot of good people are employed by The Athletic. But you are no longer with The Athletic, so
true.
Well, I'll read Samuel's question and then we'll get the real talk from you. Okay? And I can't remember if he tweeted this or not, so you might have seen it if he tweeted it. But here it is. Was Mr. Stoeten, when they call you Mr., you know it's going to be serious, okay? This is serious, okay? Was Mr. Stoeten relieved of his duties at The Athletic following the episode of his podcast with special guest Stephen Brunt, who's also an FOTM, but I'm adding that part, but we're back to Samuel, in which he sounded quite inebriated?
That did happen in quick succession, yeah.
So, okay, now he used big words like inebriated, and I am an English major from U of T. I know what inebriated means, but I am going to ask it differently. So you got you're Mr. Drunk Jays fans. So to live to the brand, live up to the brand, you had too much to drink, and you did your podcast with Stephen Brunt, who's amazing. He's no longer with Sportsnet, by the way, and which you know. And because of your drunkenness on this episode, the Athletic said goodbye to you.
I wouldn't exactly put it that way. That did come up because I did have that. That was not. That was probably not my finest podcast. But
did you know you were? Did you know? I'm curious because I always know when I've had one too many, and then I'm like, okay, Mike. So you were aware. Okay.
Yeah. Also had a producer who probably could have been like, well, let's not post this, but that's neither here nor there. But also, I was fired without cause, and they haven't replaced me.
So without cause means they have to sever you, right? Like,
they did, yeah.
So okay, good. That's good.
Okay. Some of the stuff my lawyer would probably tell me not to be talking about, but because it's just between friends here. No,
no one's listening.
Yeah, and I don't know. So I guess that was the impetus for it, which was a bit odd to me considering that this was basically the Drunk Jays podcast that they bought. And it was, I was probably a little too drunk on that podcast. I'll admit that.
But did you say something? Was it just that you had one too many pops? So you were a bit like maybe a bit giggly and a bit slurry?
I think you probably hear it. I think they didn't like that I had admitted it on Twitter also. But
okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I did not really get a straight answer about that. I didn't get like, hey, you doing okay? I didn't get a lot of stuff out of that except here's this podcast that we bought from you to do the way that you you usually do it. And I guess they didn't like that anymore.
And I'm
So-
getting. I have not heard this podcast, by the way. But Stephen Brunt, I mean, I know him well enough. He's been over here a couple of times. We exchange emails often, including recently when he announced he was no longer with Sportsnet. But I can't imagine Stephen Brunt being at all offended by this. Like, so this isn't.
No,
like,
he was like, "What the hell?" Like that was fine.
That's
What
like
are you
his
talking
jam.
about?
I think he'd be into it probably.
Yeah. I've been Steven. I'll email with Steven from time to time as well. He's great. He's always been a great supporter, and I mean, he'd been on the Drunk Jays podcast when it was certainly a little bit weirder than what the Athletic was.
Well, and that's a great point too, which is that because this is I know what it's like. I started a podcast. You're on it right now. So it's like, I feel like I can have one too many Great Lakes and we can, shoot the breeze on this. But I mean, I did a podcast for Canada Cabana guys. We all got high on my back deck, right? Like, it's a more informal, it's not like radio. You're not making a hit.
That's the format. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's not uncommon, which is why I didn't really, I did, like I said, I did think I had a couple too many, maybe not one too many, maybe more than one too many, but really didn't think anything of it.
Well, I'm sorry this happened to you. It's interesting they haven't replaced you.
My own dumb fault. So let's not be. Let's not be too sorry.
You can get comfy in those. Trust me. You're doing a podcast with Stephen Brunt. You can get a little relaxed and comfy. It's not quite the same as I'm going to be jumping on CBC News World in a minute to talk about the pennant race or whatever. Where it's like, okay, maybe it's a different vibe, right? Like, so I think it's especially when it is a part of your brand, like. I mean, let's face it, you are famous for Drunk Jays fans. Like, this is drunk in the name of the title. But okay, Drunk Jays fans, you're living up to expectations here. So I'm sorry that happened to you. Just checking out. I have all these things coming in here. But okay, so they didn't replace you at The Athletic. So I've never subscribed to The Athletic, but Hebsy did. And Hebsy and we chat once a week for an hour. We actually do it live on his YouTube channel, and we record our chats. That's how transparent we are. But one of his big bones to pick with The Athletic is how he finds their Blue Jays coverage subpar. Like, a lot of people wish that you were back at The Athletic because you offered some great insight. They didn't replace you. I'm not sure who's covering the Jays right now for The Athletic, but they're being covered considering the demand for the analysis about this baseball team. Like, it's a damn shame.
It is. I mean, I can tell you one person who doesn't want to be back at the Athletic, or doesn't want me back there, and that's me. I mean, I'm wary of burning bridges and stuff because lots of great people work there.
We already banned from Rogers and Bell. Okay, so there's not. Those are the biggest bridges we have.
True, I suppose, but also none of this that happened there would, from my understanding, which I've never really talked to anybody about, but just the sense that none of this was the Canadian side. This was all like the American side and the top down kind of stuff that they started sort of implementing. Like there was an algorithm that was like, okay, if you don't hit this many number of posts in a month, then you get flagged, and then you have to go into a program that helps you. That they're pointing you towards how to get more subscriptions, and that kind of stuff all kind of crept into it. So I've been much happier away from stuff like that, not from the colleagues or the pay certainly. But it's like I said, I never felt super comfortable there anyway. But as for right now, I know that Caitlin McGrath, a colleague of mine, she was always there. She started as an editor and then came on the Blue Jays beat. She does great work. I know she's just gone through COVID. She had some stuff this summer, so that in her life that she had to deal with, that I think has made it so that the coverage was a little bit lesser, and had they had more people covering the Blue Jays, that certainly that gap wouldn't have been as noticeable. But she does great work. Caitlin's super awesome. But yeah, I think John Lott, not long after they let me go, announced his retirement, right. And neither of us have been replaced over there. It was in my mind, my exit. It was I gave him a convenient excuse to do some cost cutting that they were kind of interested in, and that had been for a while. That docked everyone's pay during the pandemic, and they bought my podcast and paid me, made us whole in terms of what we lost on the Patreon, because we were like, well, if we sell this to you, or if we move this over, we're dumping this revenue stream for ourselves. And they did that for a year's worth of the Patreon, and then it was back to whatever, then that was gone. Then the podcast was just theirs, which, that's how business works sometimes. But also I was like, okay, it feels like my paycheck just keeps declining over time here. So
right. As inflation goes up and your paycheck goes down, and you're working twice as hard here. But listen, I hope this is a.
I was never my best friend there, so I don't want to like cry about it, and also I don't want to say it. I mean, those are true facts, so there's no problem with me saying it. But had a lot of great times there, and awesome people, and much happier now.
And I hope that talking about this is at least a little maybe therapeutic. I don't know if it's how you're feeling here, but
we'll see if my mom listens or not.
Well, yeah, let me know if she does. Okay. So because so many good FOTM sent in questions, I'm going to actually just start reading these questions, and then we'll listen to your reply here. But Chris writes, and some of them are kind of out of order now that we've just got you leaving the Athletic, and we're going to find out what you're up to now. Of course, we talked about your the Bat Flip Substack people can subscribe to. Chris writes, how big an adjustment was it going from podcasting with Drew for all those years to Nick? And then he puts in parentheses, for the record, I think Drew's and Andrew's podcasts this year have both been excellent.
Not a huge transition, really. I mean, Nick is a sharp guy. So, obviously the chemistry is a little different. Drew and I have been doing it for so long, and Nick and I haven't done it in person because I'm in Peterborough, and Drew and I had that rapport. Like, he would come to my house and we would crush beers, or I would crush beers and he would politely drink one. That's the product that was purchased. Cough, cough. But no, it's been great. And Nick's been awesome, and it's been a great transition. And the podcast space, people really seem to enjoy it, as and it's been great. Like Nick, I didn't know what I was going to do podcast wise, because Drew obviously stayed on with the Athletic, still does great stuff on his podcast, like the questioner says, working with Ricky Romero, which is amazing, and also Caitlin. But yeah, like Rick, I mean, yeah, just chatting with Ricky Romero about baseball every week, that's pretty awesome. But yeah, Nick and I, neither of us really, because Nick had been at Yahoo and had done podcast stuff there. I believe with JP and Cebia and various others. But whatever, 2 seasons ago, 29, I don't even remember when we started it. It must have been 2020. Or no, it must have been 2021. Neither of us had a new podcast, and he just said, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I got to do something here. Like, it's money on the table, right? Because especially like moving to Substack, and got to give people a little more incentive than I sometimes do to go and pay up for a subscription. And he approached me, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. Like, I'd kind of called him Negative Nick in pieces a little bit, because I try to stay on the optimistic side of things, but sometimes hard hitting analysis doesn't get to take sides like that. And Nick does a great job of that. Nick does a lot of great writing for Sportsnet and for True North, or whatever the hell that betting vertical from the Star is. And yeah, he just approached me. It was just like, oh, that's a perfectly natural move, and like Nick's great, and it's worked out really nicely. Like, he's been an awesome partner to do it with.
Istanbul Leafs, this person's handle on Twitter, writes, working independently looks to be the future of sports media. Are you able to make a living with your Substack and podcast?
Yeah, I surprisingly, yes. No, it's the Substack and the podcasts. It somehow works.
Amazing.
Right?
Yeah, like, that's everything,
sure.
Right? Yeah.
I wasn't sure it was gonna. I mean, don't get the smile in my voice and the surprise in my voice wrong. Like, I still would love everybody listening to subscribe and to pay me money. Like, it's not. I'm not making the money that I was before, which, as I probably shouldn't have mentioned, did seem like it was declining there a little bit in the first place. But I mean, Peterborough, as expensive as the housing has become here, still not as expensive as living in the city. So that helps a little bit. But yeah, no, that's all I do. That's the podcast, the writing, the watching of the Blue Jays, stuff like this. We'll see. Like I say, we'll see how it goes. I've never planned anything, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and hopefully it just keeps getting bigger and better. That's how it's felt. It's definitely felt like it's definitely felt like people's credit cards expire and sometimes they don't renew them. And it's like if everybody who at one point was paying me was continuing to pay me, then I would feel real good about it. But it's still a grind, and I probably should be pumping out more content. I probably should be doing that, right now. But I'm sure I'll find a way to make this into some content. And yeah, it's been great. It's a much happier existence not having to. Not that I didn't love my editors and all the colleagues, but it's nice to just do what is kind of the blogging format again.
And as you've reminded us a few times, there's no 5-year plan for Andrew Stoeten, right? Like you run on. It sounds like you run on guttural instinct. Like
yeah, I mean, I would like to think that if there was some planning involved, I would have been a little bit farther ahead at this point. Yeah, no, I've never been interested in climbing or whatever. I don't know. I just did. I'm very pleased at the fact that I can just do what I do and be that guy, and I'll milk that for as long as I can.
Yeah, like if you just step back and say, hey, I watch the Toronto Blue Jays play baseball, and then I write and talk about it, and that's my job. Like, meanwhile, there's guys working, I talked to a rock star the other day who's working, takes a shift in Hamilton at the steel plant or whatever, the steel mill there. Like you've got it, man. This is it. This is the goal, to live writing and talking about baseball. Like, it's amazing. I'm sitting here all jealous of you. Like, because even I have the podcast, sure, and it's a revenue stream, but I produce many other podcasts in order to cobble together the living I need to make. But then again, I do live in Toronto, but still, and I have 2 kids in university, which I should get my Patreon going. But anyway, enough about me.
I mean, I did get my smart serve at some point just in case, but
I got it too. I got it too. I served beer for Great Lakes at the Rib Fest in Centennial Park just before the pandemic. Yeah. Tough though.
Centennial Park. Love Centennial Park.
Yeah.
Batting cages there.
Yeah, no.
Go-karts.
You're right. Go-karts, batting. There's a golf course. That's the place to be. Absolutely. And you can ski there, I think, in the winter too.
I believe so, yeah.
Hey, this question I got to get to because there's a guy, and I never talk about him on the podcast, but I think I'll address it. But there's a gentleman in Edmonton, Alberta named Matt Layden. And I've been getting emails and tweets from Matt forever, okay? And I get them almost on the daily, I think. Just to let people know, like, I've chatted with a relative of Matt about Matt, and Matt is a guy, like, I have a lot of time for. Some people think he's rude. I don't think he's aware he's being rude. I really do think, based on what I've learned about Matt in my conversations with people who know and love Matt, that Matt doesn't have this necessarily the self-awareness of any rudeness sometimes when he asks questions about, replacing somebody who just stepped down because they're battling cancer or something like that. Like, so he's unintentionally rude, and some people want to tell him to F off on Twitter. I've got notes from people, FOTMs, who are like, and I've got all the time in the world for Matt, and Matt, you can DM me every day, all day long if you like, and I'm always going to reply. But so I'm going to read Matt's question for you because he asked me, I think, 20 times to make sure I ask you this question, okay? And every time, Matt, I promise I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, so hi there, Matt Layden in Edmonton. I have a question for Andrew Stoeten. Hi, Andrew Stoeten. Any chance, since you are covering Blue Jays baseball, Sportsnet will hire some people next year to cover Blue Jays baseball, because I think it will inject new spirit. So the spirit of what Matt's asking here is there any chance of you joining the Sportsnet team next year to cover Blue Jays baseball? Because he thinks you've got a great spirit that could be injected into the Sportsnet roster.
Well, that's lovely to hear. Thank you, Matt. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't think that what I think about that matters. I would gladly take money from sports, and I have no. I work for the National Post. Clearly, I'm just a mercenary out here. I think everybody who works at Sportsnet does a really good job. I mean, that's sort of an easy thing to say, and obviously, like you said earlier, Rogers. Everybody who covers baseball in the city just about is working for Rogers, and I'm sure that I know that comes up for those folks all the time. But Art and Shai, Ben, like those guys do great work. Dan, the TV side, can get a little curmudgeonly when it's both Buck and Pat, I find. But but also those are gems of Joe Siddle's analysis is great. I think Sportsnet does a really great job. I don't know that it needs a new spirit injected.
Well,
I'd love to
Vicky,
see them have Ben Wagner on the road trips though.
yeah, agreed, 100%. Now, Vicky, this relates nicely to what you just said there about Sportsnet, but Vicky writes in, please, oh, please get, I think this is a reply to Matt's tweet, actually. Please, oh, please get someone new in there. Tonight, September 22nd, we're back to Tabler and Martinez with no Dan Schulman to make things tolerable. And Tabler is babbling, Martinez as bad as ever, mute TV time. Now, that's Vicky's opinion. I will say, as a guy who watches a lot of Blue Jays baseball, that when Dan's calling the game and Buck is doing color, that's great. And when Buck is calling the game and Tabler is doing color, it is less great.
Yeah, I mean, great. To each their own, I suppose. But I tend to.
Well, what do you say? What are your thoughts? You watch a lot of Blue Jays baseball.
Yeah, I mean, Dan is incredible, and I think he elevates everybody who is there in the booth with him. I think Tabby is. I've never been the hugest Tabby fan, and I think that this summer he's been great, and I think that Dan probably has a lot to do with that. Not to disparage Buck, and obviously everybody loves that Buck is back, and Buck is like the voice of the team, and I think I wrote for The Athletic. He was basically like the face of the franchise for a while in that weird period between Donaldson, Stroman, and like when Vlad showed up, or there was a time when like Buck was what the Toronto Blue Jays are, and deservedly so. But they can get a little old school, I feel, and can get on their hobby horses a little bit. I feel that this question, I don't know how dated it is, but like, were they playing the Rays? Because you hear a lot about small ball and you hear a lot about the Rays, and I know that drives people nuts sometimes. And we'll probably get it with the Yankees too. But I think that when Buck had to step away for a bit this year, we really saw what we had missed, and I think a lot of people and I myself felt like. We tried them a little bit sometimes, and on Twitter, calling him Teoscar Hernandez. I'll tweet pretty much anytime he does that. And there are foibles there, but it's part of the whole package, which is really charming and really good. And I would love for Buck and Pat to continue on doing for a very long time. I think that also, when that's the only thing you listen to and the only broadcast you consume, you don't notice how good it is compared to like a lot of the other broadcasts. I think that there are markets where it is not cared about as much, and you never hear a bad word about either of those guys either. So yeah, kudos to them. I do love Dan. I do think he elevates everybody, but yeah, Buck and Pat, I've got time for them. I've got a lot of time for them.
All right, a different Dan. I don't think this is Dan Schulman, but Dan PB writes in, what's the biggest difference covering the Jays now compared to when you first started blogging about this team? Seems like the appetite for Jays coverage online has grown quite a lot since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's a competition, really. I mean, there's just so many talented people doing it. I mean, that sounds like a corny answer, but like we were like the only game in town in terms of like somebody who would like say shit in a thing about the Toronto Blue Jays. And now they're everywhere. Now, I mean, that was sort of what we were doing at first. Like that was a response to the fact that we did not really vibe on the content that was being cranked, because the only content that about the Blue Jays, the only coverage was, the Star and the Globe and the Sun and the Post and it was just that the digital coverage was still really in its infancy, I thought. And so now there's just a ton of people who are trying to break into the business, and I, weren't as fortunate as me to come along at such a time as to, sort of fall ass backwards into it. But a lot of talented people, and it's great to watch. There's a site, Blue Jays Aggregator, that sort of replaced the RSS feeds for me, because it just collects everything that's written about the team and all the podcasts and all that stuff. And you can marvel at it some days. Like there's just a ton of stuff you can crank down. Maybe not as much as there should be, but
you keep setting up the next question. Like, I feel like you can see my notes here. Can you see my notes here? Confirm or deny? Can you see my notes here? No.
No. I'm just insightful, apparently.
Well, Eric writes in, if possible, I'm interested in how Andrew would rate his experience using Substack for aspiring baseball writers and content creators. Does he think the subscription-based newsletters are a better way to go than the traditional blog templates, or applying to sites like Jay's Journal, Bluebird Banter, etc.? What would you say to Eric?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great success stories out of, like Keegan Matheson came from Jay's Journal, I believe. There's value there. A lot of that stuff, is sort of content farming, and you're not going to get well compensated. You're probably not going to get compensated if nobody knows who you are and you're starting a Substack either. Like I'm fortunate enough to have like had an audience to trade for work. Basically, that's what my career has been, and that's why it's sort of endured despite various moves for various reasons to different platforms. Substack, I probably would go another way if I had it to do all over again. I think people like it's a well. First of all, they take 10%, which is scandalous. If you're on Ghost, it's a nonprofit, and it does not do that. So that's a tough pill to swallow some days when it's just like, I mean, what am I getting for that? I don't know, because I make a living wage coming in off that, but it's skimmed off the top by the fine folks at Substack. But the platform is clean and it looks nice and it's really easy to use. And I hope that more people are going to be able to do this, and this becomes more common, I guess. Like it is kind of like fragmentary, and we see in other media like where that kind of goes, like how streaming has kind of like curved back towards looking a lot like cable again, and so I'm certainly not going to claim to know anything about where the industry is going and that, but I do know that it seems to be a good delivery device for my work. And a good way for me to
it gets the job done,
get
but
income in. Yeah,
if you could do it again, though,
it looks nice.
You would. It's interesting. You would use a Ghost as your CMS if you could do this again.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I've thought about switching it. I mean, I don't like the politics of some of the Substack people, like what they seem to value like as a company, but and I don't particularly like supporting that. But also, it's now a comfort thing where I don't feel like I don't know that it would be a great idea.
Well, dude,
it's too precarious right now for me to go messing about with how that income comes.
Yeah, you can't afford to break something. And I know what you mean, because I was on TorontoMike.com, which has never been subscription based, so it's a bit of a different animal, but it forever ran on movable type. Forever, okay? Like I delayed moving it because it was a big fucking job, and there was 10,000 entries and there was like 100,000 comments, and I didn't want to lose anything, and the move, so it was a painful move, but I realized I actually have to get off movable type. Like I have to get off this, and I chose Ghost. Like after a lot of I didn't want to do this again, and I'd spent a lot of time looking at all the different options for this, and of course WordPress and all these things. And I know everybody uses WordPress, but I never fell in love with WordPress. But Ghost ended up being what I moved to. Anyway, it was just interesting to hear you reference Ghost. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what people value, because I don't know what Ghost's capabilities are in terms of like the mail stuff. I hate email. I don't,
right.
Which is weird, because like the vast majority of people that are reading my stuff are doing so from emails and signing up for the email list, and that's sort of like the thing. And I'm like, oh man, I'd love to go. If I could, I'd go weeks without looking at my stupid email box. I don't like it. You can find me on Twitter. That's where I live. But I think people really value that too, and that's part of also what I wouldn't want to break, because I think people really like that. I don't really know enough about Ghost, but yeah, that 10%.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Now, this has been, dude, this is honestly, I knew so little. I mean, I knew the thing. I knew you were here, you were there, you had this podcast, then you had this podcast, and then you this, and then you were at the Athletic, and then you weren't at the Athletic, and then I was hearing rumors about why you're not at the Athletic. But I'm like, it's amazing though. You came here, you took all the questions. You didn't tell me to fuck off once. You're like, I'm going to answer this guy's questions. Tobias Vaughn did write, can you ask Stoeten if he still has nightmares about Lucas Moura?
Oh God, yeah, I do.
And this is I had to Google him, so I will admit, like I got the question and I Googled Lucas, and tell us, maybe for those who don't know, who's Lucas Moura?
Lucas Moura played for, maybe still plays for Tottenham Hotspur. Scored the goal that Ajax, the team that I follow, Ajax Amsterdam, were minutes, seconds away from going to a Champions League final. Inexplicably, improbably, Erik ten Hag was the manager, is now at Manchester United. Part of what has lifted him to that job was the work that he did with Ajax, who I've been a fan of since forever, because my family's from the Netherlands and my dad is, and that's sort of the center of the universe there. No disrespect to PSV Eindhoven and Feyenoord, but yeah, Lucas Moura scored a stupid goal to send Ajax out of the Champions League.
Oh.
And, it was a tough one. That was a real tough one. I mean, there are goals I hate more, but that's up there.
And then I was going to ask you about this, and then we'll see if you have a thought on it. But recently, Matthew Ross, who's a Montreal guy, I actually, way back when I was just like a little blogger or whatever, I would appear on his show on whatever team, whatever, I can't remember anymore, but whatever sports radio in Montreal, I would pop on and talk about Leafs and Habs stuff and whatever. But Matthew Ross, he made comments about Alejandro Kirk's hustle there and his body type, and maybe this wasn't a good look. And he got trounced on Twitter. Like, it was tough to watch. And then Matthew Ross deleted his account, and then he issued an apology. But what say you, Andrew Stoeten, about Matthew Ross v. Alejandro Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, well, from what I understand, and I watched some of it, but not a guy that I followed. I ended up wading into it because he had talked about Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s body type at one point in a similar way in a quote tweet of one of mine. So I was kind of like, well, since I'm in the receipts, here's what this guy, you know, he doubled down. He didn't back down until Al Manoa really started like nuking him. Which was delightful. It maybe felt a little bit, you know, had gone a bit too far the other way with the way that he was getting dumped on, and then his apology was not great. But yeah,
it was. You know what? I read the apology, and I think the first paragraph should have been the only paragraph of the apology. Everything after that, I'm like, okay, just you know, you gotta know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Well, and especially because there's a 2009 tweet, which I saw people replying to the apology, where he's quote tweeting me and being like, I hope Vlad, if he's going to be the face of baseball, gets himself in shape. And it's like, well, no, so this is just like this is a long-term thing for you, which, I mean, I don't agree with any of that shit, but also, I don't know, that's fine if it's a long-term thing for you, I guess, but also don't say it's not, and don't like all of the reaction to it did not help the man, and I don't think anybody's particularly upset by it. I think.
Now I'm going to publish this episode like about 10 minutes after we say goodbye. It's going to be in the feed, and I'm going to tweet about it, which means many people will actually hear you before Monday night's Yankees Blue Jays game, and there's a lot of eyeballs on this game, of course, because Aaron Judge sits, I guess he's at 60 right now, and he's coming to town, and there's a chance to tie Maris and then, you know, break Maris's American League. And I like to call it like the what's the unperformance enhancing drug single season home run record, if you will. And which is exciting. I actually just I think his first at bat yesterday or his second, I can't remember. I had my 8-year-old watching it just before bed, and I was like, please hit, like, you know, at Yankee Stadium there, please hit the 61st homer so my 8-year-old can see it, because I had hyped it up so much, and what you're witnessing, and you're going to see history. Anyways, he took a walk. But okay, so so anything to say about Aaron Judge and how you think the Jays will do? And then I'm going to play some lowest of the low. And you're now an FOTM, and you earned it, buddy. This was great.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a blast. I'm still nervous about what I was saying about some other stuff, but we'll see how that goes. But
I look forward to your edit requests later today.
There won't be any edit requests, but no, Aaron Judge, I mean, it is an impressive record, right? Like Roger Maris, that was a long, long time ago. So to break a record that old, even though it's the American League record, like I kind of don't like how it's the guy who did it clean record, because that's you know, the 60s was full of greenies, people doing, you know, uppers to there have been performance enhancing drugs for a long time. Right. I think that it's kind of a weird thing that that baseball likes, that they can sort of scapegoat guys like Barry Bonds, guys like Roger Clemens, who are very, very easy to scapegoat because they're kind of shitty dudes,
right,
for what was a systemic problem and a problem that the league and other media was really complicit in for that time. And they kind of, you know, got religion on it after the fact. And I think MLB really should have to hold its nose, like not even as just an organization, but as you know, the sport in general needs to hold its nose and be like, that's our record, we let that happen, and take some accountability for that, and not sort of pretend that this that this Aaron Judge pursuit is the real record, which is kind of like, no, people aren't saying it outright, but I think that's kind of the spirit of a lot of why this is going on. But also, I mean, he's how many home runs ahead of like the next guy? Like, it's an incredible season. He's been unbelievable, and just to get to watch him is pretty awesome for everybody who's going to be there this week. And I hope they don't. Hope nobody like goes nuts trying to catch a ball that they think they can sell.
Oh my God, yeah.
But that's there were jokes when somebody was offering like $1 million to whoever caught the ball. I don't know how serious that was, but there were jokes online about, the Yankees, the bleacher creatures are gonna really take that. And it's like, that's funny, but also in the back of my mind, I'm like, they're gonna be in Toronto in like a few days, and I don't know that we're gonna be all that much better. I don't know if,
Yeah, I heard $2 million. I think I heard that someone's
Okay.
offering $2 million or something for that ball. The funny thing is, Hebsy and I talked about this Friday, and I'm like, yeah, I'm holding on to this for the highest bidder, and Hebsy's like. And I don't know, I think he was serious because, I don't know if he was just, trying to get a reaction or whatever, but he went on the record on his show and said, like, he'd give it to Aaron Judge for, like, if he got to meet Aaron Judge and got, like, a bat or, like, some souvenir or something and a photo of Aaron. I'm like, are you nuts? Like, are you nuts? Like, this is the league that canceled the 94 World Series. Like, and it just, to me, it's like, no, this is business, baby, strictly business.
100%. I don't have that many Substack subscribers. I'll take the money, whatever I can get off of that ball. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, so as I play Lowest of the Low, I'm curious, like, what are your jams? Like what genre? Like, what's a band you love? Just give me a taste, because at some point maybe you want to return to Toronto Mike and kick out the jams with me. But what does Andrew Stoeten listen to?
Kick out the jams, like MC5. That's a great band. Stooges, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
is in my wheelhouse. That was kind of it's the inspiration when I was playing in my days. But I have varied tastes, of course. But that's when I always come back to. Funhouse, what a record.
So at some point, you might return to Toronto Mike. We can catch up and play your 10 favorite songs of all time and hear why you dig them. Does that sound good?
I would love to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it's funny here, we wrap up, but you're, Mr. Drunk Jays fans who got in trouble for, drinking beer during a podcast. I just want to have a beer with you here, man. Some Great Lakes. So hopefully we do it in person next time.
Yeah, that would be great. Absolutely. This is fun.
And that brings us to the end of our 1118th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Okay, Andrew, tell us your Twitter handle and then remind us where we could go to subscribe to your Substack and everything.
Sure, it's just my name, Andrew Stoeten, and it's Stoeten, and you can find all my writing at thebatflip.ca.
Thebatflip.ca. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U's at Sticker U. Electronic Products Recycling Association are at EPRA_Canada. Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. And Canna Cabana, they're at Canna Cabana_. See you all tomorrow when Jane Hodden makes her Toronto Mic'd debut.